this is the task, and this is the network diagram, and you can see the critical path with the red arrows.
Okay. How did you find the critical path?
Hit the by dividing the earliest finish and the latest finish, so it will get 0. So it's the critical path that we are making.
Okay. Just give me a minute. So your critical path is 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 12, 17, and 18.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Can you go to the sheet 1 just to understand the tasks? Okay, good. Rishmi, can I see yours also?
Yeah.
Guys, anyone has questions on what Shatika presented? Okay, Rishmi, you can share your screen. Okay. I want to know your task D and task G. G should be sales cycle, I think. Okay, perfect. Okay. So, good. So you both have the same critical path.
It's the same.
Yes. But did you notice that you did it in two different ways?
Sorry, Pasinu. Pasinu, everything okay? Do you need the breakout room still?
No, no, not right now. Not at the moment. We're just discussing last week's
No?
what we did last week. No, we don't need the breakout rooms right now.
Okay, okay. Thanks. See you.
Thanks a lot. Bye. So guys, what is the difference that you see in the two methods, two network diagrams? Tarini, what is the difference that you see?
In Shatika, I saw they have mentioned some days as four days that we have taken 10 in the W.
Okay. Some days that you okay. No, no, that's not what I was looking for. I don't think I think both have taken the same durations, to be honest. Okay. Shatil, can you share your one also? Just give me a minute. Give me a minute. Give me a minute. Give me a minute. Okay, Shatil, can you share your one also?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Now, what is the difference that you see? So both have the exact same amount of days, right? 238 for both of them, right? So earliest finish for the project that they forecast is 238. What's the difference from task 4 to the other tasks, from Shatikas to Rismis?
Response, Fasino, the diagram goes as parallel.
Yeah.
The 6 and 12, yeah. G and M goes as parallel. A, B, C, D, G, M, Q, R goes as parallel.
Correct. Can you open your WBS, Shatika? Okay. Look at the WBS. Okay, you can't actually see the difference in the network diagram. You can see the difference in the WBS. Now, if you look at create DB, task number 17, Shatika has one prerequisite, which is number 12, supply chain integration testing. Okay. Rishmi, can I see your WBS also?
Oh, yeah. Can you see?
No, not yet.
All right, sorry. I think I can't. You control the content of the presentation.
Maybe Shatika, you can stop presenting. Okay, I'll share something. Okay, now can you try to share?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so for you, you have for the database queries, you have all of the testing as prerequisites, dependencies, right?
Yeah.
Whereas what Shatika's team did, they just calculated the longest testing cycle, which is the sales cycle, and then they put that here.
Right. So as 10.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the difference. But whatever method you select, so it's two different schools of thought, but still, you arrive at the same network diagram, same result at the end of the day. Right.
Got it.
Okay. Anyone has any questions on what we did so far? Is it clear to all of you? This is very important because you also have to do the same thing for the case study.
Yes, Patterson. So far it's clear.
Okay, good. Great. So we can start today's session then. Today, what we are going to talk about is risk management. So we've covered our triple constraints, which is scope, time, and cost. In any project, first thing you get from a customer is the scope. Customer would come to a developer saying, okay, I need this done. So what he says is this is the scope. So first thing which comes to a project is the scope. Once you know the scope, then you will have to come up with an estimate. How long it would take, what is the time frame, what kind of resources you might need. So then you would work on the time management aspect. With time, you know exactly how long it's going to take. With time, you can do the costing. So that's the logical order of the life cycle, right? Now, today what we're going to talk is on risk management. Again, this is a very important thing. You need to manage your risks from the beginning of the project to end of the project. So this is as important as the previous three sessions we did. So again, like, if you have any questions in between, please feel free to stop me and ask those questions and clarify them, so that we all can be very clear on this process group. So when it comes to project risk management, what it does is it gives you a structured way of managing your risks, planning for the risk management actions, be it mitigation, be it contingency plans. So it would help you plan your risk responses and to control the overall risk to the project. When talking about risks, what do you think is a risk? What is a risk? What would be the definition of a risk?
Hello, Mr. Pasintu, are you sharing the slide or not?
I am. Do you not see the slides?
No, we can't see.
Not yet
Okay.
possible.
Can you now?
Not yet. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Prem. Thank you very much. Everyone can see the screens?
Yes, Basil.
Okay, good. So what do you think is a risk? What would be the definition of a risk? Can someone tell me? Tarini, what is a risk for you? Tarini?
Pasindu, my hello. Yes,
I can
Pasindu?
hear you.
Yeah.
What do you think as a risk? What is a risk? What is the definition of a risk?
Defined as a financial terms, it take a chance of outcome.
Taking a chance of an outcome. Okay. Anyone else? What I mean, we are just brainstorming. We are just trying to understand what is a risk. Anyone else have different definitions for risks?
The hazard which may impact the project cycle.
Hazards which may impact the project cycles. Okay. What else? Hasita, what do you think?
A situation which involves exposure to danger, some kind of risk.
Okay, situations which may bring danger to a project. Good. Harindra.
It's some kind of a danger which we do not know what are the gray areas.
Okay.
I know for us it goes as like medium, high. Sorry, it goes from low, medium, and high for us in aviation. So that's all I know.
Okay, good.
Thanks.
Thank you. Shatika?
We are doing something that might enter some kind of a danger.
Okay. So all of you, like from what I understood, all of you think risk as a negative thing. Am I right in assuming that? Is risk a bad thing?
No,
No.
not all.
Okay. politically correct answer, but your definition goes against it. Yeah, risk is not always bad, and I mean, all of your definitions were almost right. So in project management terms, we consider any uncertain event as a risk. If we don't know the outcome of that would bring to the project, that's a risk, because we don't know. What we don't know, we can't plan. So that is a risk. But not all the risks are negative. Not all the risks are bad. There are positive risks and there are negative risks. Okay. What is the difference between a risk and an issue? Rismi.
Risk and an issue, is it?
Yes. What's the difference between a risk and an issue?
Risk is it's a probability of it's a probability of a loss or damage. It's a probability.
Okay.
Issue could be issue can be that is like it's what I said was earlier. It's a probability. Issue could be what is exactly has occurred.
Okay.
Which
Perfect.
is existing.
Perfect. Exactly. So a risk, we agree that it's an uncertain event. So there's a probability of that risk materializing. Issue is a past tense. So whatever risks which have materialized are issues. So issue is when an event occurs. Risk is when you know that it has a probability of occurring, that there's a possibility that it may happen. You put it as a risk. When you identify a risk, you would assess its impact, you would analyze it, and you would have a risk response strategy. It can be to avoid that risk, it can be to mitigate the risk, it can be to have a contingency plan, or it can just be like, you would wait and accepting that risk. Whereas when there's an issue, you need to analyze it and you need to resolve that issue. If you can't resolve that issue, you need to escalate it to someone who can resolve it. Okay. This is clear so far, right, guys? The difference between risks and issues, what is a risk, what is issue, all that. This is clear so far, right?
Yes, possible.
Okay. Now, as I told you earlier, you have negative risks and positive risks. Negative risks are known as threats. Generally, we associate the term risks with negative things generally, but winning the lottery is also a risk. It's a positive risk. It's an opportunity, right? Because it has a probability of it happening, and there's a if it happens, there's an impact. So whatever which has a probability and an impact becomes a risk. So positive risks are called opportunities. When you have an opportunity, you would try to maximize it so that you can take the maximum out of that positive risk. Negative risks are called threats. You would try to avoid it as much as possible, or you would try to minimize the impact as much as possible, so the damage to you is less. Okay. Now, with regard to threats and opportunities, you have two different response strategies. So we would discuss them. What do you think the response strategy for opportunities be? What would you do if there's an opportunity?
Checking whether it's feasible.
Checking whether it's feasible. Okay. Yes, you would do that. If it's not feasible, what would you do?
finding an alternative path.
Okay, so for any risks, we have a probability and an impact. Okay. This is known as risk exposure, right? Risk exposure is probability times impact. When there is a possible, when there's a possible risk which brings a positive outcome, when there's an opportunity, first thing you would try to do is you would try to exploit it, right? You would try to increase the probability of that risk happening. Okay. If it's to win a lottery, you would try to get more lottery tickets so that you have a higher chance of winning the lottery. So you increase the probability, increase the odds. That's exploiting. Okay. Second response strategy is to enhance. Okay. Increase the probability or impact of the opportunity. So enhance generally focuses more on the impact. If the risk materializes, how you can get the maximum out of it. Now, I'll give you a classic example, right? Generally, with regard to the budget outing of the country, right? Like, in Sri Lanka, when the budget would be presented, people get to hear certain things. People would hear that, okay, there would be a extra tax on vehicles, like, imported vehicles, things like that, right? So what they would do is they would stock them up front. So when the tax goes up, they can sell the cars at a higher price. So they do things to increase the impact, right? So that's enhancing. Third thing which Shatika said is checking the feasibility, right? You would check the feasibility and you might realize, okay, you don't have enough capital, you might not have enough money to do it on yourself, on all by yourself, right? So then what you would do is you would share, rather than having 0% of that opportunity. You would share it with a partner and you would have some percentage. So joint ventures is a good example for opportunity sharing, risk sharing, right? And then the fourth strategy is accepting. You don't do nothing, you would accept it. If it comes, it comes. If it does not, it does not. Simple as that. Any question on these four risk response strategies with regard to opportunities?
Pasilu, can you explain enhance again?
Yeah, enhance focuses on increasing the impact of the risk, right? When the risk materializes, how you can increase the impact. Like I said, if you know upfront, if you hear upfront that there is a possibility of a tax increase on imported vehicles, probably what you would do is you would try to bring down vehicles before this rule implies, so that when the rule implies, you have a lot of vehicles which you brought with lesser tax, so that you can sell it at higher price. You increase the impact of that risk. Does that make sense, Shatika?
Yes, Pasilu. Understood.
Okay. Vishka, Nishita, Harendra, Tharani, any questions? Hasita? All
Not
good on
so
this?
far.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, now you know what you would do for an opportunity. Okay. What would you do for a threat? Rishmi, now for opportunity, we would make sure that it materializes. For
Yeah.
a threat, what would we do?
I may I will try to find ways to uh, to like to avoid it.
Exactly.
First, that will be the first thing what I will do, or try to find ways to reduce the harmness, like of that risk.
Yeah. So when it comes to positive risks, you would exploit it. You would make sure it happens. When it comes to negative risks, you would avoid. You would make sure that it would not happen. When it comes to positive risks, you would increase the possibility of that happening or increase the impact of that happening. When it comes to negative risks, you would reduce the probability, reduce the impact of that happening, right? You would mitigate. Then what about sharing? What would you do with regard to sharing of a negative risk? You would transfer it. Okay, so only common response for both positive risks and negative risks is accepting it. Doing nothing, we have a contingency plan and we would accept it. Let's take a small example to understand the different scenarios. Let's say that you have a car, you have a vehicle. Okay, what is the risk when you have a vehicle? You can meet with an accident, right? When you're driving. Okay, in order to avoid the risk, what would you do? You would park the car in your garage and you would, like, take public transport, right? You avoid the risk of that car getting meet with an accident. Straightforward, right? How would you mitigate it? Hasita.
I'm sorry, could you please repeat the question?
Yeah, now we have an example. We have a car and risk is when you drive the car, you can meet with an accident. So in order to respond to this negative threat, there are 4 ways. One is avoiding. We talked about avoiding. In order to avoid that risk, you would park the car in the garage and you would use public transport or you would walk. How would you mitigate the risk?
Have an insurance?
No, not really. Pray, how would you mitigate the risk?
Maybe carefully driving on following the guidance something.
Okay, driving carefully
Yeah.
can be an answer. Tarini? How would you mitigate it?
Try to reduce reduce the time you use the vehicle.
Okay, good answer. You would reduce the time that you would use the vehicle. Yeah, so both are correct, right? You would either drive very carefully so that it would reduce the probability of meeting with an accident. Tarni said you would reduce the use of vehicles, so again the probability goes down. Maybe you would drive extremely slow so that even if you meet with an accident, the impact is less. Maybe you would drive only at late nights or like early mornings, avoiding traffic cars. All of these can be mitigation strategies, right? You would either reduce the probability or the impact. Now, what is transferring the risk? Hasita, what you said is transferring of that risk. By having an insurance, you don't reduce the impact, you don't reduce the probability of having an accident. But when it happens, you would not pay for it. Insurance company will pay for it. So you are transferring the risk at a cost. You say, okay, I'm using my vehicle. There's a risk. Please take the ownership of the risk for me. I will pay you an annual fee of 50,000 rupees maybe, right? So that's a transferring of risk. You have a third party take take the responsibility for that risk. Sometimes you have insurance, you don't have any claims, right? Sometimes you have insurance, you have many claims. So it goes both ways. And accepting it similar, you have a contingency plan, you decide, okay, I'm going to have the bare minimum third party insurance, which I need to have in order to put the vehicle to the road. If there's an accident, I have spent X amount of money, I have saved X amount of money to repair the car. If I meet with an accident, I would use it. If not, I will keep it. So that's accepting. Are you clear on the two strategies for opportunities and threats? Any questions? Rishmi, are you clear?
Yes, clear. Pasadu, if you don't mind, can you put the previous screen for a bit?
Sure.
The opportunities one. All right.
What,
right. Okay. Thanks.
What do you want, Rishmi?
No, I just want to see the exploit one, ensure the opportunity is realized. Right. Fine. Fine. Okay. That's it. That's it.
Okay.
Thanks, Pastor.
You're welcome. Okay. Now, generally projects have 5 different stages. You have a initiation phase, you have a planning phase, you have an execution phase, and you have a closure phase. Apart from this, you have monitoring and controlling, which happens throughout. Okay. When is the risk highest to a project?
In the beginning?
Yes, in the beginning. Why is it highest in the beginning?
Maybe we don't know what the actually whether we have done all these feasibilities, or we are not sure about this, and the risk and everything. We are not sure about. That is the reason maybe in the beginning we will face more difficulties and risk.
Okay. Risk is highest to a project at the beginning. You're not wrong, Prem. Okay, it's also correct. Risk is highest in the beginning of the project because you're not committed, right? For an example, I can go to an architect and I can say, okay, I want a house built. This is the initiation of the project. I will tell, okay, I want this done. This is my budget, all that. But as a customer, I can walk out of that project anytime because I'm not committed to that project initially, right? I've not invested enough. Maybe I've done few background searches. I've done few researches. I've spent little bit of money on the architect. That's it. I can at any time I can pull the plug, right? So at the beginning, it's easier to drop a project. Now, let's say you do the initiation stage, you come to the planning stage, and even in the planning stage, okay, now what happens in initiation stage, you would agree what you're going to do, you would spend a lot of time, you would spend energy. You would finalize the scope, you would finalize the timeline, budget, all that. And then you would come to the planning, right? You would say, okay, this is how I'm going to build the house. These are the resources. These are the stages, right? And then it will come to execution where you will start building the house. Now, as you move across this curve, okay, you spend more time, you spend more money, you spend more energy. Then the chances of you pulling the plug on the project becomes lesser and lesser because you're committed, you spend so much energy. So you want to see it through, right? Does that make sense, guys?
Yes, Padma.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah. So again, like, this graph is theory, but what is the application for your life? If you are a project manager, if you are handling a project, you need to be very careful during the initial stage, because initial stage is when you have the highest risk to the project. Client can, like, pull the plug anytime easily. So during the initial phase, you have to manage your stakeholders well. You have to monitor the risks very carefully. So next week we would probably discuss about stakeholder management. Again, like, we will have a similar graph which we would discuss. So during the initial phase, you would have to spend a lot of effort, lot of energy on risk monitoring, stakeholder management to ensure that project kicks off and project has a smooth start. Once it goes through that cycle, then it's easy. It is the same thing like you put children to schools in Sri Lanka, right? This is not in other countries, but for some reason in Sri Lanka, it's trending away now. When it comes to government schools, they have, like, few schools, like, in Colombo there are few, in Galle there are few, in Kandy there are few. You have these reputed government schools. So everyone will put a lot of energy to put their children into those schools. They would spend a lot of money, they would spend a lot of effort, energy, all that. But once you are in the school, you won't spend that energy to, like, to push them to study and all that. You would not spend the same energy. It would decrease gradually, right? It's the same cycle in a project. Now, this shows the impact of the risk with regard to time, right? What if a risk materializes? Now, earlier graph is different. It shows the risks to the project. This shows the impact of the risk. Okay. Impact of the risk is lowest at the beginning. Why is that?
Yeah, Mr. Pasindu, before you, can we take impact of the receipt equal the issue? Oh, similar. Oh.
Risk and issues are two different things, right?
Okay.
Issue is when the risk materializes, right?
Yeah, that's fine.
So yeah, I mean, like, you can consider that as well, because when you have an impact, if you incur that impact, it's past tense and it becomes an issue. So you can think it that way as well, not a problem.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
Okay. Why do you think impact is lowest at the beginning of the project? Harindra. Why is the impact lowest at the beginning of the project? Nishita?
Because we haven't started the product yet.
We haven't started the project or product yet. Yes.
I mean, we haven't faced any issues.
Yes, true. Let's take example again. Let's say you're building a house, okay? In the initial stage, you have a plan, you have a detailed plan, you know how your house going to look like. You agree on the scope and everything, but all of a sudden you decide to go to this. Harindra, you would
Hi.
have to go mute on one device.
Okay. I just logged off from one and then I re-signed in again from the other one. So can I log out for the others?
Yes, now it's okay. Now it's okay. Now perfect. Cool.
Lovely. Thanks.
Thank you. So you come up with a plan for a house. You agreed on the scope. You agreed on how you're going to build it, the timeline, everything. You go to these. You take a second opinion, and then he wants certain modifications done, right? Or your wife wants certain modifications done, or your husband wants certain modifications done. You haven't put a brick on the house yet. So at that stage, if you want to change it even fully, you don't have much of an impact. You have not spent enough money. You don't have any wastages, right? So impact is lesser at the beginning. But once you do the finishing and everything, you decide, okay, you've done 3 rooms, you have 2 en suites, and you wanted the third room also to have a attached bathroom. Okay. When you reach that level, when you wanted to do that change, you would have to take off the tiles. You would have to uh, redo a bathroom there. Maybe you would have to take down a wall. So there's a big impact, right? So towards the end of the project, the impact of the risk becomes higher. Towards the beginning, it's easier. Towards the beginning, it's lesser. Is it clear, guys?
Yes, Basil.
Okay, good. Now, when it comes to tailoring, now you would not use the same risk management strategy for all the projects. If it's a larger project, your risk thresholds are higher. If it's a smaller project, your risk thresholds may be less. So when it comes to tailoring, you consider 4 main things. One is project size. Okay. If you are delivering a project with 2 people versus 200 people. Okay. If one person falls sick for this project, you would consider it as a major risk. If one person falls sick for this project with 200 employees, you wouldn't mind too much about it, right? So project size is something you would consider when you're tailoring risk management. Is it clear? Second thing is project complexity. If it's a very straightforward project, even if you have a risk, you can easily pull out. You can easily make up. You can easily align again. But if it's a complex project, if there's a lot of unknowns around it, you would need to manage it more closely. So again, when it comes to risk management, complex projects versus simple projects, you have 2 different strategies. Third one is importance of the project. what's the importance for the client, what's the importance for the contractor or the vendor, right? Based on the importance, if it's high importance, you would give higher weightage for the risk management. If it's low importance, you would not give too much of a weightage for the risk management. Fourth aspect is development approach, right? You have different development styles. You can do agile project management, you can do a waterfall method. You have multiple ways to run a project. So depending on your development approach, how you tailor the risk management would change. Okay. So with regard to risk management process, you have 7 sub processes. First thing, like we did for scope, time, and cost, you start with a plan. You have a plan risk management sub process. In the plan, what you would do, you would consider these tailoring criteria. You would have a plan to manage your risks. You would say, okay, financially, if the impact is beyond $10,000, I would consider it as a risk. Anything less would not qualify as a risk. When it comes to human resources, this is my threshold. So plan risk management, you would have thresholds, you would have reporting criteria, you would have monitoring frequencies. All that you would decide in your plan risk management sub-process. Once you have a plan to manage your risks, second thing is to identify risks. How are you going to identify risks? Who's going to identify risk? How often you're going to identify risks? Where are you going to log the risks? How are you going to log the risks? What is the format? What are the criteria you're going to capture? So all of this would be discussed and decided on second sub process, which is identifying risks. Now, practically in a project, you might identify hundreds of risks, right? But if you are to put a response strategy for all of those risks, you won't be able to manage the project. You will only be able to identify the risks and put response strategies, right? You need to manage the project as well. Because of that, you do a qualitative risk analysis. What is a qualitative risk analysis? What do you think? So Harindra, you said earlier in your organization, you categorize risks as high, medium, low. So that's a qualitative risk analysis. Qualitative risk analysis would you would look at the risk from outside. You would categorize them as high, medium, low, critical, different formats. Or you would rank the risks. Okay. Basically, you would have segregations for the risks. Okay. So that's your qualitative risk analysis. What is the advantage of a qualitative risk analysis? Can someone tell me? Tarini, why would you need to do a qualitative risk analysis? What is the importance of a qualitative risk analysis? Harindra, maybe you can tell. You have experience with high, medium, lows.
Well, for us, if you're in the low, medium, or high, it's like we do the Swiss chart pie thing, and it allows us to mitigate. If you're in the low risk, if somebody identifies, then it's easy. Then if you go to the medium risk, that means it does create an alarm whether we go back or whether we continue, depending on the type of risk that we are at. And high risk involves a lot of, I would say for us, if we go ahead with the risk, it will involve us with a lot of penalties. So it's for us to go back at the medium point. We decide whether we continue or whether we come back.
Okay, got it.
Thanks.
Good. So same thing, right? If you put the same thing into a project management context, you have high, medium, low risks, let's say. Now, if you have one person looking at all the risks, it's very difficult. You might miss certain things, you might not be able to effectively do that, all of it, right? So if it's a low risks, probably you don't need to even worry about it. You would monitor it, you would let it be, because first thing about a risk is it's an uncertain event. It has not materialized. So low risk can be either it has a very low probability or it has a very low impact. If it has a very low probability, you don't need to worry too much. If it has a very low impact, again, you don't need to worry too much, right? So maybe low risks, you would not manage it. You would accept it completely. When it comes to medium risks, you can have a plan. You can, like, as a project manager, and the leads can group and have a plan to mitigate them, exploit them, all that, right? Because it's a medium risk. If it's a high risk, maybe you can escalate it easily. If it qualifies as a high risk, it's beyond your pay grade, and you would escalate it to the next level so that they can take the necessary decisions. You can escalate it to the steering committee. So this gives you, the qualitative risk analysis gives you easy classification to focus your energy on the right risks at the right time. Does that make sense, guys? Because as a project manager or as a project team member, you can't focus on all the risks all the time. So you need to focus your energy on the important ones. That is what is achieved by qualitative risk analysis. Is it clear?
Yes, Pastor.
Okay, good. Once you do a qualitative risk analysis, then you do a quantitative risk analysis. Quantitative risk analysis is to stack rank your risks in with regard to risk exposure. So what is risk exposure? We discussed earlier. Risk exposure is impact times probability. Okay. Now, from the qualitative risk analysis, you would take maybe you would take high and medium risks, depending on the list, and you would you would identify the impact and probability, and you will stack rank them. Again, what this does is it would enable you to focus on the right risks better. So in the qualitative risk analysis, you got the important risks with a very low energy. In quantitative risk analysis, you would stack rank them. So even on the high risks, you would that would ensure that you would prioritize the most important risk at the beginning. So at this stage, you have you've done your risk ranking, and you have a list of risks with risk exposure. Now, next item is to have a response strategy for the risks. Again, initially when we identify, we had 100, let's say. When you do the qualitative analysis, you did high, medium, low, let's say. You have low 50, medium 35, high 15. Okay. And for quantitative risk analysis, you decide to go only with high risks. You decide to monitor the low and mediums. So you have a list of 15 risks stack ranked with regard to impact and probability. Now, at this stage, you will only have risk response planning for 15 risks. Okay. What if this materializes? What are we going to do? What if this materializes? What are we going to do? What is the contingency strategy? What is the mitigation plan? If it's a positive risk, how are we going to exploit it? How are we going to enhance it? Right? So you would have a very detailed risk response strategy for the key important risks. Okay. So again, this helps you save time. This helps you focus your energy on the right risks. Once your planning is completed for risk responses, then you will have to implement those risk response strategies. So you would ensure those risk response strategies, and then finally you will monitor the risk. You will monitor the trend of the risk. Is the risk deteriorating, or is it increasing? So these are the 7 sub processes of risk management. Do you have any questions, guys? Okay. So what we would do, as last week's, we would look at inputs, tools and techniques and outputs for each of these sub process, but we will do it very quickly today. There are a few artifacts, there are a few things, few new things where we will spend more time and we will discuss it. Okay. So again, as I mentioned, planning risk management is basically having a plan which describes how you would conduct your risk management activities for that project. So it helps you to understand who would be involved, who would participate in the risk management activities. How are you going to inform your stakeholders on the risks? How are you going to monitor the risks? How are you going to quantify the risks? And what kind of a risk strategy as an organization you would have? Certain organizations accept risks. Certain organizations have a very risk aversive strategy. So based on the organization culture also, you would have your planning done. When it comes to inputs, tools and techniques, you would use project charter, project management plan, organization process assets, enterprise environmental factors, and project documents as inputs. Because all of them will have information, critical information about the project. It would have stakeholder information, it would have financial information, it would have timelines, it would have external interfaces, all that. So with that, you can have a good plan for managing the risks. Tools and techniques which you're using, you would use expert judgment, you would gather data. This includes data from previous projects, data from market researchers, all that. And then you would have meetings. One output, which is the risk management plan, which details how you're going to manage the risks at different stages of the project. Second sub process is identifying risks. how are you going to identify risks? This is what is discussed on identify risk subprocess. Who's going to look at the risks? How are you going to identify the risks? How are you going to log the risks? How are you going to monitor the risks? How you would assess the risk to the overall project? All that would be discussed and agreed on identify risk subprocess. Tools you again, like for the inputs, pretty much the same thing. Only thing we have stakeholder register, scope, baseline, and agreements as new documents. Why we need stakeholder register? Stakeholder register would also help us who will uh, actively take part in identifying risks. Agreements will bring third parties into the picture. So what are the risks around those agreements you would have to discuss and decide? So that also becomes an input for the identify risk subprocess. When it comes to tools and techniques, you have expert judgment, data gathering meetings, you have data analysis and prompt list. What is a prompt list, guys? So prompt list is a checklist with category of risk. So rather than like, you know, having all the risks in one document, you will categorize the risks. You will say, okay, here are my environmental risks. Here are my technical risks. Here are my HR related risks, likewise. So it helps you to segregate risks, and it would help you to focus on different segments, and also it would also help you to delegate the risks. For an example, if it's HR risks, you can directly ask your HR department to take care of those risks. Likewise. Guys, is it clear what we are discussing, or do you have questions, or is it completely unclear? What is the situation?
It's clear, Pasidu.
Okay. You guys are very quiet, so that does not help me understand where you are. So that's why, sorry about it. So now the third sub process, which is perform qualitative risk analysis. To be honest, I would consider these three are the most important sub processes in the risk management area. And then finally, this one, monitoring. Okay. Even in projects, when we do a project, you wouldn't spend too much energy on, like, you know, the planning risk management, identifying risk and implementing responses. You would focus a lot on qualitative risk analysis and quantitative risk analysis. Based on that, you would do the planning, and then you will monitor the risks. So as I explained earlier, qualitative risk analysis help you prioritize your risks based on the probability and the impact. You would not do a stack ranking. You would not do any math. You would not calculate the exposure. But looking at it, it's a qualitative analysis. It's not a scientific method. It's not a right or wrong thing. For example, Harindra's low risk might be a high risk for Tarini. Prem's medium risk might be a high risk for Hasita. right? So it's a qualitative risk analysis. Everyone's risk acceptance is different. So it's a qualitative risk analysis, but it helps you to prioritize risks quickly. When it comes to input, you would use project management plan, organizational process assets, enterprise environmental factors, and project documents. When it comes to tools and techniques, you would use expert judgment, data gathering, data analysis, data representation, and risk categorization. Only one output, which is project document updates. Now, when it comes to the qualitative risk analysis, you would come up with a risk matrix. Okay. So this is a risk matrix. Okay. Again, you don't need to put the numbers. You might only need to put like, you know, low, high, medium, critical, or low, medium, high. Doesn't matter how you want to do it. So this is an advanced risk matrix where you captured the exposure as well. Okay. So consequence is impact, likelihood is probability. Okay. Probability times impact is 1. Like, you know, if the impact is 1, if the probability of that happening is 1, 1 times 1 is 1. If the probability is 2, impact is 2, then your exposure is 4, right? So likewise, this matrix has the exposure inbuilt, but you don't need to have the exposure to do the risk matrix. You can say high, medium, low, and you can have the risk categorized according to high, medium, low, and then you can focus on the high risks. Okay. So that's a qualitative risk analysis. This has a combination of qualitative and quantitative because you captured the exposure as well. Now, what we did effectively, we found about 100 risks here. We segregated the risks on high, medium, low. We found about 10 risks here, which are really important. And here we would do a quantitative analysis. We would detail out the risk. We would understand the benefit of the risk, understand the impact, understand the threat to the project, and then we will quantify that risk. What is the quantitative impact of that risk? So based on that, you would do the risk exposure calculation, and you will have it as either a 25 exposure or a 20 exposure or a 1 exposure, right? Same inputs like the qualitative analysis. We have modeling techniques as a new tool and a technique, and you have the same outputs. This is a very important artifact, risk register. Okay. Generally, you do the risk register after you do a quantitative risk analysis. So for each risk, you have a risk ID. You need to understand when the risk was raised, what is the description of the risk, what is the likelihood, whether it's a high risk or a medium risk or a low risks. What is the impact? Again, you can have high, medium, low, or you can have 1 to 5, 1 to 5 here. And then risk exposure is risk impact times probability. You would put the impact, you would put the exposure. For each risk, you will have a risk owner who's going to own the risk, who's going to take care of that risk. And then you can have a risk response plan. You don't need to necessarily have these two columns. You can have response strategy, and response strategic might be mitigation, might be contingency, might be exploiting, might be enhancing, might be avoiding, might be accepting, any one of them, and you can have that response strategy. And this is the monitoring part, right? Progress on action. So when you implement that risk response strategy, what is the progress? Your impact became less. Your probability became less. What is the risk status finally, right? So this is a risk register. Now this is very important because even in your assignment, I want you to come up with a risk register for the assignment as well, right? Have any one of you read the case study yet?
No, not yet, Pasido.
Not yet.
Okay. Okay. So what I would recommend, okay, is it's really good time now for you to start with your assignment, because what we discuss directly can be transferred into your assignment as well. Like last week we did the network diagram. So your case study also has a network diagram that you need to do. So maybe you can do the network diagram, then you can come up with a risk register, so that you don't have everything piled up until the last minute. And then if you share them with me also, I can give feedback as well now. But when it comes to, like, when it comes closer to the end date, it would be difficult. So start it now. We can clarify your doubts. We can, even discuss it during the class also, so that it will be easier for you guys. Okay.
Pasido, for the assignment, is there any possibility that we can, like, at the last, end of the class,
Yes.
like, be able, like, is it, I don't know whether it's possible just to go, like, shall we go through the assignment, like that? I mean, if there's any, to start off with, like, I have a confusion, like, once I read it, like, how to start, I mean, to
Okay.
initiate. Now for
Okay.
marketing, it's very, it's very clear. I mean, we
Okay.
got we have already started the
Okay.
presentation and we know what we are doing. So if you can give just the start off,
Okay.
then
Okay.
we'll continue.
Okay.
Thanks, Pastor.
Sure, we can do that. So maybe not today. What I would suggest is I would like all of you to read the case study for next week. And next week we'll spend about half an hour. We'd go through the case study. I'll explain you the expectation and I'll help you get that start. But
Thanks, Pastor.
if you read it now, it would be a brainstorming rather than a one-way communication. Right? We'll do that. Sure. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, good. So we've come up to quantitative risk analysis, which is our fourth sub-process. Now, next one is planning risk response strategies. Okay. So this helps you to develop options, understand strategies, and agree with all your stakeholders on what actions you're going to take in order to reduce the overall project risk exposure. Okay. So what it does is it effectively identifies the right ways in addressing the project risks. Okay. Planning risk responses involves allocating resources and initiating activities so that so that you can kickstart the response, and you will also update your documents with the planning that you've done. Same inputs, there's no change whatsoever. When it comes to tools and techniques, we have new two tools here, which is risk strategies and contingent response strategies. How you are going to plan the contingencies, what are the different strategies you're going to use, which we discussed at the beginning of the class, right? What are you going to do for positive risks? What are you going to do for negative risks? What are the contingency planning you're going to do, all that, right? And then finally, decision making. Again, sometimes you would take the decisions as a panel. You might not be able to come to consensus. In such events, in such incidents, how are you going to make a decision? So can someone tell me the 4 group decision making techniques we discussed? Shatika, do you remember?
No, Pastor.
Anyone who has a clue? When you don't have consensus, how can you come to an alignment, come to an agreement? We discussed 4 strategies. One is unanimous. You want everyone to agree. Okay. Then we spoke about majority. Okay. Where you have more than 50% agreeing to the decision, right? Then you have plurality. Largest group holds the decision. And finally, you have dictatorship. One person takes the decision on behalf of the team. Okay. So these are the 4 decision-making techniques that is available. And finally, when it comes to outputs, you have project management plan updates, and you might have change requests, right? So guys, there's a small mistake from my end. This is not perform quantitative risk analysis. This is a planned risk responses. Once you do the planning, your next step is to.
Sorry to disturb
Sure.
you, Mr. Pashanto. This is about so far is up to 4 is fine. Maybe also 6 also can. You will explain that bit confused on the this plan risk response. It will not include when we are planning the first stage. We don't want to think about the risk response in the initial plan.
Okay. Okay. Good.
Oh.
Good question, Prem. Good question. So risk response planning happens throughout the project. It does not only happen at the beginning of the project. Okay. Let's take an example. Let's say you're doing a project for 2 years. Okay. At the beginning of the project, you might know certain risks. You might say, okay, this is a new technology. I don't have expertise. So you have certain risks you identified. With those risks, you have response planning. You might say, okay, I'm going to give a training on this new technology for all my team. And timeline is tight. I'm going to add more resources so that I can manage the timeline. So you have response strategies at the beginning. Correct, Prem?
Yes, understand.
Now, during the project also, you might get to know new risks. After after 1 year, you might realize your the critical 2 resources are going to resign, right? So what are you going to do? You have to develop a response strategy then. So planning response strategies happens throughout the project. It's not limited to the beginning of the project. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. You answer me. That's only I'm confusing that particular stage or process. Only we are going to think about planning the response, or whether in the initial level we have to think about. That's you answer well. Yeah.
Okay.
Understand.
For when it comes to risks, you need to identify risks throughout the project. It's everyone's duty, not only project manager.
Yeah.
All the team members should identify risks. All the team members should help plan risk responses, right?
Yeah.
So it's a ongoing activity in the project. It would not be limited to the first phase or the planning phase or to the development phase. Likewise, it would not be limited to a phase. It would happen throughout. Okay, good.
Thank you.
Now, implementing risk responses is very clear. Whatever you plan, how you're going to implement. That is what we are going to talk about in implementing risk responses. Inputs you are going to use is project management plan, organization process assets, and project documents. We use expert judgment and project management information systems as tools and techniques. Again, I'm sorry about the typo. This is implementing risk responses, not performing quantitative risk analysis. Okay. What happens when you implement a risk response? You have to update your project documents. Also, you might come up with change requests. Okay. Finally, our last step of the risk management sub-process is monitoring risk. Again, monitoring risks happens throughout the project. It talks about the identified risks. It monitors the agreed risk response strategy. It also monitors for new risks that might surface. And it also evaluates the effectiveness of the risk responses that you implemented. This helps you take right decisions, taking into consideration the overall project risk. Again, sorry for the typo. This is monitoring risks. You have work performance data, work performance reports, project management plan and project documents as inputs. You have meetings, audits, and data analysis as tools and techniques. You do audits to see the effectiveness of the responses you implemented. It's a part of your monitoring activity. Outputs, you have project document updates, project management plan updates. You might get change requests because when you monitor, you might realize, okay, this mitigation strategy has not worked as I wanted it to work. Because of that, you might need to initiate a new change request. So change request becomes an output of monitoring risks. You have work performance information and organizational process asset updates. Any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Pasinto, this we can see that the previous the process and the monitoring process between the outcome is the change reports. There's both
Change
process. There
requests.
will be a change request. Then
Yeah.
based on this change request, there are any process on this review or redesign will happen? Where is there any between where will happen this? Any that is any process, or it will include in the this particular all this process, or?
Okay, yes, good question again. I'll give you an example which I faced in my life. Okay, I was involved in a project to roll out an ERP. It was a new technology with SAP called Fiori. Okay, if for those of you who don't know SAP, it's a ERP. It's a very hard to use ERP, I would say, with a lot of transactional codes that you need to know in order to operate. What Fiori does is it gives you a graphical user interface, like your Windows, like your Mac. It gives you a graphical user interface. So project was for a critical customer to change their SAP to a Fiori platform. Okay. Um, when I did the initial planning, I realized two major risks. One with regard to the resources, because Fiori was relatively new, and we did not have a lot of people who were experts in Fiori within that organization, within MAS. Okay, so that's one risk I've realized. Second risk is with regard to the technology. I mean, technology itself is new, and even when it comes to external parties also, we could not get right knowledge from right people, because it's completely brand new. With those risks, so with regard to technology being new, we had to accept it. There's nothing we could do about it other than training, which we did. With regard to resources, we put additional resources and we started the project. Okay. We hosted the project in AWS, okay, in cloud. We executed the project for about 4 or 5 months. We realized the architecture that we initially proposed has a lot of constraints in rolling out the project. When we started implementing certain features, we realized we can't do them properly. There are a lot of delays in doing that. There are a lot of slowness. There are a lot of limitations because of the architecture we've used. At this stage, it was a risk because in order to do the next activities would take a lot of time, would take a lot of effort in order to do that. So we highlighted that risk. We brought it up to the steering committee. We agreed that the architecture we used initially was not the optimum thing. So we decided to scrap the project. We decided to redo the project from the beginning with a different architecture, right? So it's a change request at that time. So when it comes to a CR, there is a process of accepting a CR. So first thing is that you would log a change request, that you identify, okay, I need to do this change. Once you identify the change, you need to understand the impact it has on the project. What is the cost impact? What is the timeline impact? Those are the two main impacts which you need to discuss with regard to the client. So we realize the cost and the timeline. Since it was a mistake from us, because we go as an implementation partner, we go as a trusted advisor, it was a mistake from mine. We agreed that we would absorb the cost in terms of resources, but timeline still customer would have to agree. So initially internally with the C-level, we had a meeting. We agreed on absorbing that cost. So remember last week we spoke about when it comes to budgets. We spoke about reserves, contingency reserve and management reserves. So this is a good example of a management reserve. Contingency reserve I had to deal with known unknowns, but this was an unknown. So I had to go to the C-level, agree, discuss, and come to an alignment. So we used the management reserve for this extra cost, right? With that, we went to the customer, we agreed, we explained the situation, we told what we are going to do to rectify the issue, we told the impact that he would have in terms of the project timeline. So he was not very happy about the timeline delay, but we negotiated, we make sure he gets certain things up front versus certain things at a later stage in a phase-wise approach. So we agreed on that. So once you agree, you you log it as an approved change request and you continue the project. That's the general life cycle. Did I answer your question, Prem?
Yes, very well, because that is a well elaborate example, Mr. Pasithu. This my question also, I also had gone through the similar experience, and that's the reason compared to other process 701 and this review and the change all things compared to the time and the value is more than the other process. That is the reason whether I think whether we have to see this change or review or redesign also as a process, or can be managed within this between this monitoring implementation. Something very well elaborate. Thank you.
Okay, so definitely when it comes to customer, two things which matters most to the customer is the timeline and the cost. So as long as you have a strategy in order to address it, you should be good. So that's the main thing. Good. Now there are two other things I wanted to discuss today. One is a SWOT analysis. Second one is a PESTEL. So SWOT is very straightforward. I would not spend a lot of time on it. SWOT analysis you do at the beginning of the project to understand the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So it also gives you a very high level overview of the risks involved and what you can do, what you have internally to leverage the opportunities and to mitigate the threats. So it's a good tool you can use at the beginning of the project to understand the opportunities and threats at a high level. So this is very common knowledge, so I'm not going to spend more time. But the PESTEL analysis, we'll spend maybe 2 minutes on this. Generally, when it comes to new projects, like for example, if you are going to a new territory, if you are moving your operations to a new location, it's good that you do a PESTEL analysis.
Sorry to disturb you, Mr. Pasithu. This is just for your information. We have gone through this SWOT and PESTEL our earlier international marketing session also, just for your information. Very
okay,
deeply.
perfect.
Yeah.
That's great. Do you have any questions on PESTEL analysis? Anyone?
Also, we have think about another E also. We've been that one more E.
Okay.
Yeah, that's include in the.
What's
maybe.
the additional E?
E is legal. No, E is ethics.
So we have two E's.
Ethics, frame.
Ethics. Between the last TL, no, some other our colleagues will.
Okay, you have a PESTEL like this with another E.
TWL.
TWL.
Okay.
TWL.
Okay.
Between, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, something.
Okay, good. So I'm not going to spend time here then.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions on what we discussed?
No, Basil.
Okay. Now, when it comes to recording a risk, I've seen a lot of problems, right? So what I want you to do is, now we agreed that by next week you would come to the class reading your assignment, right? Case study. I want you to create a risk register. I don't want you to fill the risk register, but I want all of you to have at least 2 risks on the risk register properly filled. Do you think you can do that?
Yeah, yes, I can.
Yeah. So this is with regard to case study. Okay. It's available in the Moodle. So go through the case study, read the case study, come up with 2 risks that you see. Now, likelihood and impact, it's qualitative. I mean, for example, Nishita, you might think it's very likely this risk might happen. Shatika might say it's likely, not very likely. So it's okay. Don't fuss about it. But at least have 2 risks. Can you do that?
Sure, sure.
Okay, good, great.
Yeah.
With that, we can wrap it up today. I'd be available for the next 10 minutes or so if you have any questions. If you don't have any questions, you can also leave. Thank you, guys.
Okay.
Basudev.
Thank you, Basil.
Thank you very much, guys. Bye.
Hi, Pasindu.
Hi, Vishka. Hi.
Pasindu, I have a small question.
Yes.
So it's regarding to this risk register. So let's say we have a team and one developer couldn't work for a sprint. So then that will affect to our timeline. In that case, Pasindu, who will be the owner of that risk? Is it the developer or project manager?
So it depends on the organization, right? Also, it depends on the way you do the project. Now, from what I understood, Vishka, you're having a agile delivery, right?
Yeah,
And is your sprint 2 weeks or 1 week?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. In a 2-week sprint, one person is not available for a week. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So in that case, I mean, people fall sick, people have to take leave. That's quite normal, especially in the current situation, that's expected. So I would think project manager as the owner. And generally, now in Agile, we don't do this, but generally in a waterfall project, we have shadow resources. We have people who we train, very junior guys in the team, so that we can manage a person going on leave for a day or two. But since it's a week, it might not be easy to catch up. But I mean, you can always, as a project manager, you can always talk to the client. You can tell, okay, this sprint I'm going to have a spillover, but during the next 3 sprints, I'm going to catch it up. You can have a plan like that, which might not be rectified in the immediate sprint, but on the long run, you can rectify it.
Okay, Pasindu. Okay.
Does that make
Thank you.
sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Prem, Harindra, Tarini, do you have any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Pasindu, not a question, but these when we are categorizing these doing the low, medium things, whether it's a which perspective is there? Which perspective we have to categorize the risk is in terms of final goal or final objective or any? Oh, I don't, but I have to refresh anyhow. But the
Okay. Straight answer is it would not really matter because either you might categorize them considering the impact to the project, or you might categorize them considering the magnitude, right? Either way, I mean, generally, right? It's consistent. So you would have a category which is consistent. So it would not matter too much, I would say.
Great. Thank you. That's a doubt.
Uh,
Thank you, Mr.
But
Sindhu. Yeah,
sure.
go ahead.
But
Go ahead.
one thing now, with regard to likelihood and impact, let's say you are trying to build a hotel in the beach. Okay. When you do your risk assessment, you come up with a tsunami. Okay. So like possible tsunami happening as a risk. Okay. Your impact would be high, very high.
Yeah.
If it happens, your hotel will be doomed.
Yeah. Totally.
Your likelihood of that risk might be very low.
Yeah.
1.
Yeah.
So with that, your risk exposure is 5.
Yeah.
So it would be a low risk still, right? So even if the exposure is high, you don't need to consider it as a big risk. So when you categorize risks, you need to consider both impact and probability, and based on that, you should categorize. I mean, if you look at tsunami, since it's a it has high impact, you might not have a response plan for that, because chances are it would not happen.
Okay. Right. Very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Pasindu. See you.
Thank you, Prem. Thank you. See you.
Thanks, Pasindu.
Thanks, Harindra. Harindra, you said there was a question earlier.
Yeah, he I mean, he was asking the same question towards the latter part, Prem. So he just,
right.
I just got my answer. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you
Thanks
very much. Have a nice day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.